it's Michelle Lupton here, and today this is another video that I recorded live for Hero Arts on their Facebook page, and I've edited the video to show you on YouTube here. So as you can see, I'm starting with some Strathmore Bristol cardstock, which is a lovely smooth cardstock that is excellent to use with ink blending. And the stamps that I'm using are the floral mandala stamps from Hero Arts, and I'm just going to be stamping them in some Versamark ink, which is a clear sticky ink, and then I'm going to be white embossing them. So you can see I used my anti-static powder tool to prep the cardstock so that the embossing powder will just stick where my Versamark ink goes and won't stick to any other parts of the cardstock. So there's the stamp set that I'm using today. I'm just applying nice even pressure using my little ladybug pressure tool there. And I can see, it's very hard to see on the screen, but I can see in real life that I've got good coverage there. The images have stamped quite well, and I've got Versamark ink all over those images. So now I'm adding my white embossing powder, which is also from Hero Arts. I'm just going to funnel the excess back into the tub so I don't lose any, and then I'm going to heat set that with my heat tool. So the embossing powder will melt and I'll have lovely white raised images on my cardstock. Now, what I decided to do was to stamp 4 of the floral mandalas onto my card panel. This card panel, by the way, is larger than my card front at the moment, but I will be cutting it down. And now what I'm going in with is 2 of the smaller mandala images, and I'm just filling in the gaps where the other, where there's basically space between the other images. And once I've filled in the gaps, I can then again add white embossing powder to the Versamark ink and heat set that again. All right, so once I've done that, I've just got out my ink stands, and I'm going to be using ink blending with my Hero Arts brushes with some different Hero Arts core inks. So the core ink line has both dye inks and hybrid inks in it in a wonderful variety of colours. And some of these colours are brand new to me and brand new to Hero Arts as well. But some of the colours have been around for a while. This one is one of the ones that's been around for a while, but it's new to me. So this one is called Indigo, and it is the perfect Michelle blue. It's just gorgeous. Now, what I did find with this Emboss Resist is that some colours are resisted by the white embossing powder better than other colours. And it didn't necessarily have to do with whether it was a hybrid ink or a dye ink, because you can see right now that the more of the indigo ink I am adding, so the darker the blue I'm getting, you can see that floral mandala image come through a little bit better, but the white embossing has actually taken up a little bit of that colour, so the white embossing does actually look a little bit blue, but that's fine. Once I get onto the other colours, you might notice that the white embossing actually shows through a little bit more. So this is another of the core inks. This is Amethyst, which is a lovely sort of mid-purple colour. And I'm overlapping where I'm ink blending the purple over where I've already done the blue, so I get a nice blend between those 2 colours. And you can see that the white embossing is resisting this amethyst ink a little bit more than it resisted the blue ink. So if you really want really good Emboss Resist and you want the white image to shine through a little bit better, you might try a few things. One thing is just get to know your inks and know which of your inks which of your inks are resisted by embossing and which of your inks are resisted a little bit less by embossing. All right, so now I've moved on to the Azalea ink, and my aim here was to not only have an ombre in colour from blue to purple to pink to yellow at the top, but also to sort of fade out so it was a lot paler towards the top. Now, I did find that I needed a little bit more blending between the amethyst and the azalea here, so I'm just going in with a little bit more of the amethyst to get a good blend. And then I finished off with Butterbar. Now, Butterbar is a very bright yellow, so I'm using a very, very light hand with it here. I wanted a very, very pale yellow, but I also wanted a very even blend. At the moment, there's a fair bit of a sort of step between the pink and the yellow at the top. The blue blends in nicely to the purple blends in nicely to the pink, but then it wasn't quite as good a blend to the yellow. So I'm going back in with the azalea, and with a very light hand, I'm going over that Butterbar yellow with the azalea. So I'm getting a little bit more orange between those two colours, between the azalea and the Butterbar, and it gives me a much more smooth blend towards the top. Okay, so now that I've got all that ink blending done, and it was very easy to do on this Bristol cardstock, I'm just going over the embossing with a dry rag, just to basically wipe as much of the ink off the embossing as I can to get it to show through a bit better. Okay, so there's my panel done. And as I said, when I started this, the panel is significantly larger than my card front, and I actually want it to be smaller than my card front. So I'm going to cut down a fair bit off the sides so that I can have a white border around the edge on my card. Now I ended up, even though blue is my favourite colour, I ended up cutting off more of the blue at the bottom than I cut the yellow at the top, just because there was more blue there than there was yellow. So cut off a fair chunk off the bottom there, and only just cut a little bit off the top of the yellow. So that's my panel done, and I'm going to adhere that to a top folding white note card. Okay, so I'm just going to be using some tape runner to do that, but before I do, I decided I wanted a little bit of shine on this card. So I've grabbed out my Hero Arts Shimmer Mist spray, and what I'm going to do, sometimes I just use the little nozzle bit, sort of unscrew it and use the sort of tubey bit on the nozzle to flick onto a card, but I decided I wanted a bit more than that. So I've poured just a little bit of that shimmer mist onto an acrylic block, and then I'm getting out a paintbrush, very old paintbrush, and I'm just going to flick that liquid all over my panel. And so I'm going to get some very big splotches and some very small blotches and everything in between, but that will dry to give me a gorgeous shine. All right, so now I'm moving on to my sentiment. So I've got this Many Birthday Messages stamp set. It's an oldie but a goodie. And you can see that I've actually cut one of my stamps in half. So I'm just using the happy birthday part of this stamp. I can always use the two halves of the stamp together if I really want to, but I just think it's a little bit more versatile to be able to cut stamps in half if you want to. Okay, so again, I'm using Versamark ink, and this time I'm using my Mini Misty stamping tool. And just to clean off this stamp after I've stamped it, I'm using my Hero Arts scrubber. I just need a little bit of water in a spray bottle, and I'll use that scrubber to clean off that stamp, and it'll be ready to dry off and put back into my little storage pocket. All right, so I've got my image stamped there. I also prepped this piece of cardstock with my anti-static powder tool so that the embossing powder will only stick where I want it to go. That's really important to do when you're using black cardstock and white embossing powder, because the white embossing powder will show up a lot more on black if it gets in the wrong spot. So it's always good to be prepared. All right, so I'm going to cut this down, and I'm going to use my paper trimmer to cut some of the edges straight, and then I'm going to use my scissors to cut some of the edges, sort of fussy cutting around the sentiment. It's one of my favourite things to do, especially for sentiments that I don't have a matching die. So now I'm coming to assembling my card. So as I said, tape runner onto the back of that ink blended and stamped panel. I'm now going to add some little foam adhesive hexagons to the back of the sentiment so it can be popped up just a little bit on my card front. And then I'll be adding some little gemstones from Trinity Stamps to finish off the look. Now, when I did this video live on the Hero Arts channel, I actually made a second panel and I tried watercolouring it. And unfortunately, my brush wasn't as clean as I wanted it to be, so I got a little bit too much mixing between the colours, and it wasn't really what I was going for. But what I ended up doing is taking that panel once it was dry and just ink blending right over the top of it and using the same colours as I used on this card, but blended them much more intensely, so I got much more vibrant colours. So if you're interested in having a look at that card, just click on the link and you'll be able to see a photo of that card on my blog. So I've got both the cards to show you on my blog. So here's a close-up so you can see the shimmer on this card. You can see how the shimmer mist has reacted with the inks to sort of spread some of the colour apart. And you can see all the little gemstones that I've added. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you back again next time. Bye.